Hi, you with Julian on the brown note, and Germany have decided to send tanks to the Ukraine. Every one of those tanks can be equated for in Ukrainian civilian lives. Germany held off and initially were resistant to sending tanks into Ukraine, and I don't know whether that was because they were weighing the moral equivalence of doing so, or whether it was fuel prices that did it. But anytime any country has stepped up, anytime any European country or part of America has stepped up and said something that isn't 100% acquiescent to fighting the war in Ukraine as a proxy war against Russia, they seem to get shot down. Even Turkey is seemingly wavering. You would expect them to be non-negotiable on things like the expansion of NATO and their own ambitions regarding the European Union. And it seems like even they're being bought out. How? I'm not even sure. I mean, is anyone weighing all this up? America has spent something like over a 3-month period last year. They spent more money on Ukraine military than Russia spends on its whole military over the whole year. There are on the ground consequences to this. I've said over and over again, I'm a leftist. I don't support right-wing dictators like Vladimir Putin. I understand the reasons why the war has happened, which is not getting any notice in the press. I understand that he has invaded a sovereign country. I also understand in 2013 they had a coup which overthrew a democratically elected government. I don't think they've been doing a hell of a lot better since they elected their Western friendly government, to be quite honest. You wouldn't say that on the ground now, would you? And I've said over and over in these pieces, this is why the war's happened, and the West, I've never seen a more relentless pursuit of a narrative that has been defined in one direction without any sort of nuance from us. I've said over and over, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, why is America doing this? Why is Britain supporting them? You don't get any of that with the war in Ukraine. Finally, I'm seeing the media answering questions about this. And the really disturbing thing is the populist right have been attacking the war in Ukraine and attacking, the Ukrainian side of things. And that puts me on the same basket as them. This is very disturbing. But they're doing it because they want to oppose, because Biden's in power. If Trump was in power and he was the one leading this charge, they wouldn't be doing it at all. They'd be all over him, supporting it. So it's all bollocks. But now the media are actually asking questions. Is it right to send tanks into Ukraine? No, it's not. It's not right. There is, I don't know if I get this wrong, I think it's Marsilio of Padua in the 16th century. I left school at 16, by the way, so I don't care about being this pretentious. But he wrote a book, or a treatise, called The Defender of Peace, and two things from that have stuck with me. One is that you should never behave in wartime in a manner that makes relationships difficult after wartime. The Holocaust, things like that, war crimes and so on. But the other one is that nations shouldn't get involved in other nations' conflicts. We live in an era of people doing that, which is proxy wars. There is no benefit to Ukraine continuing to fight physically in this war. And you can say, well, they're going to get all of their sovereign land back. There's no way that Russia is giving Crimea back to you. No way. That's never happening. Because they're mainly Russian ethnics in those places. So all you're fighting for is membership of the European Union, which you don't have, and membership of NATO, which you don't have, and isn't actually being offered to you. The rest is just the destruction of Ukraine, and I don't know that the leader is doing the best by his people. I posted another bit on that. And it's taking the West down too. The Americans just lost the House of Representatives, meaning that the real life impact on Americans, I think primarily as a result of this war and the impact on the cost of living in America, is going to be huge. It's huge everywhere. And we're pushing and pushing Russia to the point where actually trying to... Russia never had any intention of occupying Ukraine. They were reacting to the West encroaching further and further along their borders, but also the treatment of the Russian enclaves in Ukraine by that government that was Western friendly. You're pushing them to a point where they might actually think about occupying the whole of Ukraine, because that will be the only option they have left if you're pushing them this hard. And if you push them so hard that they fall over, that's not good either. Do we want a failed state Russia with the most numerical nuclear weapons in the world? Is that something that we should be after? Shouldn't we have a Russia that is occupying a similar point that China is occupying at the moment, who are, by the way, standing well clear of all of this? I've made posts on that as well. We don't want a failed state Russia, and we don't want a failed state Ukraine. Ukraine is going to be in a position where they are obliterated but victorious. There's a word for that, isn't there? We all know what it is. I'm glad that journalists are finally speaking up about this. But the relentless pursuit of one narrative needs to be hit a lot harder. We're seeing the Australian Open tennis tournament at the moment, and we've got two Belarusian players in the women's final, and the controversy, and we've got people waving Russian flags. We've created this nonsense. I've never supported virtually any American war, but now the attack on even a tennis player, they're asking them questions in tennis meetings when the journalists are sitting around them about the war in Ukraine. This is nuts. Let's do this the next time, shall we? What do you think Russia or anyone else is going to do? And I've said over and over, Europe and America are not the whole world. A lot of the whole world isn't on board with the Western narrative on Ukraine. We are not seeing that support from a lot of other countries. We're just pretending that we are the world, we are the children. I don't believe that NATO is a force for good. NATO is a self-perpetuating mythology. And the only purpose to its existence is that countries spend billions of dollars of their budget giving money to America and Britain for military hardware, or possibly France. That's it. We create the paradigm ourselves where you need to spend money that you should be spending rebuilding your country on the military. And that's exactly what happens. We'll sit by, we'll watch Russia destroy Ukraine and reduce it to rubble, and then we'll say we're going back in to fix it all. But what we'll really do is take money off American taxpayers and British taxpayers, give it to Ukraine ostensibly to rebuild their country, and then force them to give it straight back to the people in private enterprise, providing them with military hardware, which is how our aid around the world has often gone. We're transferring money from Western taxpayers to Western defence manufacturers, and you have to have all of these to get your military up to speed to be the part of NATO. Is Ukraine better off after that coup in 2013? I don't think so. They didn't seem to be doing too badly at that point. They weren't invaded. Are we going to really force Russia into taking Kiev? Because it looks like we are. We're sending tanks. What the hell are we doing? But I'm really glad that some in the Western media, I saw in The Guardian a couple of articles, actually criticising or at least asking the question whether it is good to keep piling military hardware into Ukraine. I would say it's never a good idea to pile military hardware into anywhere unless you expect it to be used. And given it's a sovereign country with lots of civilians, they're the ones that are going to bear the brunt of it. So I mean, Biden is again, he's like saying, yeah, we'll defend Taiwan. I don't know what the overreaching end game is of their world policeman revisionist rhetoric here, which is let's go back to how we were 15, 20 years ago and be the world's policeman again. But stop sending tanks.